The Middle East has lurched from a state of perpetual tension into the terrifying reality of open warfare. For 7 days, the skies over Iran, Israel, and neighboring countries have been filled with the contrails of missiles and the buzz of attack drones. Operation Epic Fury, a joint US-Israeli military campaign, has shattered the long-held fragile understanding that kept a direct conflict at bay. The initial devastating strikes on 28 February 2026, which reportedly killed Iran's supreme leader and his top military command, were not the beginning but rather a dramatic escalation of a conflict that has now drawn the world's anxious gaze. The question is no longer if a wider war is coming. It is how far it will spread. At Starkon International, our mission is to cut through the noise of conflict and provide clear, dispassionate analysis of the events shaping our world. The situation unfolding in the Middle East is complex, with deep historical roots and far-reaching global consequences. Understanding this new dangerous chapter requires a sober look at the long-standing animosity between two regional powers, the strategic calculations of their allies, and the chain of events that led to this moment. We aim to provide that clarity, explaining not just what is happening, but why it is happening and what could come next, helping you navigate a world that feels increasingly uncertain. The fear gripping the region is palpable. From Tel Aviv to Tehran, air raid sirens have become a dreadful soundtrack to daily life. In Lebanon, Israeli evacuation warnings for southern Beirut signal a potential new front, while US military bases across the Gulf have become active targets for Iranian retaliation. A British airbase in Cyprus has been hit, and American citizens are being evacuated from the region by the tens of thousands. This is not a localized skirmish. It is the violent eruption of a decades-long shadow war, now being fought in the open with devastating consequences for all involved, threatening to ignite a regional conflagration. The first week of this war has already been catastrophic. Reports from Iran indicate over 1,000 casualties and immense damage to its military infrastructure, with US and Israeli forces claiming near-total air superiority. Yet, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps continues to launch waves of drones and missiles, demonstrating a persistent, if degraded, capacity to strike back at Israel and American assets. The immense financial cost, estimated in the billions of dollars after just the first few days, is a stark indicator of the scale of this operation and the immense resources being poured into a conflict with no clear end in sight. To understand today's war, we must look back to 1979. Before the Iranian Revolution, the two nations maintained cordial, if quiet, relations. The overthrow of the Shah and the establishment of the Islamic Republic under Ayatollah Khomeini radically altered the geopolitical landscape. The new regime in Tehran adopted a fiercely anti-Western and anti-Israel ideology, viewing the State of Israel as an illegitimate Zionist entity and an outpost of American imperialism in the Middle East. This ideological hostility became the bedrock of a rivalry that would define the region for nearly half a century, transforming former partners into irreconcilable foes. This animosity quickly moved beyond rhetoric. Iran began cultivating a network of proxy forces across the region, united by their opposition to Israel. The most formidable of these is Hezbollah in Lebanon, which Iran armed and trained into a powerful paramilitary force, now possessing a vast arsenal of rockets capable of reaching deep into Israeli territory. Similarly, Iran has provided extensive support to Palestinian groups like Hamas and Islamic Jihad in Gaza, funding their operations and supplying them with weapons and technology. For Iran, these groups are a forward line of defense and a means of projecting power against its primary adversary without engaging in direct state-to-state warfare. From Israel's perspective, Iran's actions constitute an existential threat. The specter of a nuclear-armed Iran has been the central focus of Israeli national security policy for decades. Israeli leaders have watched with growing alarm as Iran has advanced its uranium enrichment capabilities, viewing it as a direct path to a nuclear weapon that could threaten Israel's very existence. This concern is compounded by Iran's sophisticated ballistic missile program, which has developed projectiles with the range and precision to strike any target within Israel. These dual threats, the nuclear program and the missile arsenal, have driven Israel's long-running campaign of sabotage, assassinations, and clandestine operations. The Shadow War was the result of these competing interests. For years, the conflict played out through covert means: media group, aftermath, mysterious explosion, Iranian nuclear site, cyber attack, computer screen, Stuxnet virus, news of stock distribute equally, mysterious explosions at Iranian nuclear sites, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, the assassination of Iranian scientists, and Iranian attacks on Israeli-linked shipping. Israel conducted airstrikes against Iranian targets in Syria to prevent the transfer of advanced weaponry to Hezbollah. This undeclared conflict allowed both sides to land blows without triggering an all-out war. However, the escalations in 2025, including major Israeli strikes on Iranian soil and direct U.S. attacks on nuclear facilities, signaled that the unspoken rules of this shadow war were breaking down completely. The current conflict, dubbed Operation Epic Fury, represents the culmination of this escalating dynamic. The U.S.-Israeli strikes of late February 2026, which decapitated Iran's leadership, crossed a definitive red line, transforming the covert war into a direct and overt one. The United States, Israel's staunchest ally, is no longer a supporting actor but a primary combatant. Its significant military presence in the region, with sprawling bases in Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait and the UAE, provides the logistical backbone for the air campaign but also presents a wide array of targets for Iranian retaliation, as recent missile attacks on these facilities have shown. The risk of this conflict, spiraling into a multi-front regional war, is now extraordinarily high. In Lebanon, Israel is already engaged in heavy bombardment of Hezbollah targets, warning of a potential ground invasion to neutralize the threat on its northern border. In Syria and Iraq, a constellation of Iranian-backed militias poses a direct threat to the remaining U.S. forces stationed there. These groups could be activated to open new fronts, bogging down American resources and further destabilizing nations already ravaged by years of civil war. The entire Levant is now a potential theater of war, connected by Iran's axis of resistance. Further afield, other actors could easily be drawn into the fray. In Yemen, the Houthi movement, another key Iranian ally, has the capability to disrupt one of the world's most critical maritime choke points, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Aden. Attacks on commercial and military shipping in this waterway, similar to those seen in previous years, would have immediate global economic repercussions. Likewise, the Gulf Arab states, which host U.S. military bases, find themselves in a precarious position. Retaliatory Iranian strikes on their oil refineries and infrastructure, as seen in Bahrain, threaten not only their own stability but also the world's energy supply. This intricate web of alliances and proxy forces means the conflict cannot be easily contained. An Israeli ground operation in Lebanon would almost certainly provoke a full-scale response from Hezbollah, unleashing a devastating rocket barrage on Israeli cities. An escalation by militias in Iraq could reignite sectarian violence and undermine the fragile government in Baghdad. The Gulf states, caught between their alliance with the U.S. and their proximity to Iran, face an impossible choice. Every military action by the U.S.-Israel coalition carries the risk of triggering a reaction that expands the battlefield, making a wider regional war not just a possibility, but a rapidly approaching probability. The economic shockwaves of this conflict are already being felt across the globe. In the immediate aftermath of the initial strikes, oil prices surged and the Dow Jones Industrial Average plummeted over 1,000 points. This is just the beginning. The Middle East is the heart of the global energy market, and a full-scale war threatens the production and transportation of a significant portion of the world's oil and natural gas. Attacks on refineries in the Gulf and the potential closure of the Strait of Hormuz, through which a fifth of the world's oil passes, could trigger an energy crisis not seen in decades, fueling inflation and threatening a global recession. Beyond the energy markets, the conflict imperils the arteries of global trade. The threat to shipping in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf could force maritime traffic to take longer, more expensive routes, disrupting supply chains that are still fragile after years of pandemic and geopolitical strain. This would lead to higher costs for businesses and consumers worldwide, impacting everything from electronics to food supplies. For neighboring countries like Egypt, which warns of a near emergency, the economic fallout could be catastrophic, destabilizing governments and potentially creating new humanitarian crises on Europe's doorstep. Despite the ferocity of the fighting, calls for diplomacy have not been entirely silenced. While European governments are divided, with some supporting the military action and others urging restraint, the international community is watching with profound apprehension. Global powers understand that a full-blown, regional war serves no one's long-term interests and could have unforeseeable and uncontrollable consequences. Behind the scenes, diplomatic channels are undoubtedly being used to explore off-ramps and de-escalation pathways, though the public rhetoric remains bellicose. The hope, however faint, is that a negotiated settlement can be found before the conflict reaches a point of no return. The world holds its breath as the crisis in the Middle East deepens. The path of military escalation leads towards a regional catastrophe with devastating human, economic, and strategic costs. The alternative path, one of de-escalation and diplomacy, appears narrow and difficult to tread amidst the current violence, but it remains the only hope for restoring stability. The coming days will be critical in determining which path is taken. For continued clear-headed analysis of this and other global events, follow us at Starkon International. We are committed to helping you understand the forces shaping our future.